Every year, hundreds of people walk into America's most breathtaking landscapes and never come back. Towering forests, endless mountains, crystal clear lakes, nature at its most beautiful and its most deadly. Hikers, campers, children. Some vanish without a trace within minutes of being seen. Others disappear right in front of their friends and families, as if they were swallowed whole by the earth itself. No blood, no tracks, no signs of struggle, no screams echo through the trees, just silence. Park rangers search tirelessly. Teams of dogs comb the wilderness. Helicopters scan from above, but often there's nothing to find. Not a footprint, not a shred of clothing, as if the missing person simply ceased to exist. At first, officials blamed the usual culprits: getting lost, animal attacks, harsh weather. But the deeper you look into these disappearances, the stranger the patterns become. Clusters of vanishings in specific areas, cases where children are found miles away, across rivers, over mountains, places they could never reach alone. Stories of missing persons suddenly reappearing, dazed, confused, unable to explain where they've been. Sometimes their shoes are missing, but their feet are uninjured. Sometimes they are found in places already searched dozens of times. Sometimes they are never found at all. This phenomenon has a name whispered among search and rescue teams, a name that sends chills down the spine of anyone who's heard the stories. Missing 411. Since the early 20th century, a quiet but chilling phenomenon has gripped America's national parks. It's a pattern so strange, so persistent, that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Across forests, mountains, deserts, and lakes, people have gone missing, often in circumstances that defy all logic and understanding. These aren't cases of reckless tourists venturing unprepared into dangerous terrain. Many of those who vanished were experienced hikers, survivalists, hunters, even seasoned park rangers, who knew the land better than anyone else. Children, to some as young as 2 or 3 years old, have disappeared while walking, just a few steps ahead of their parents. 1 second they were there, small feet crunching along the trail. The next, nothing, as if swallowed whole by the vastness around them. There are countless stories like these. Stories where a person lags behind the group for only a minute, turns a corner, and is never seen again. Families search frantically. Entire communities rally. Helicopters, thermal imaging, bloodhounds, all deployed within hours. Search parties comb every inch of ground, and still the person remains missing. What's even more disturbing is the baffling lack of evidence. Often there are no signs of struggle, no calls for help, no dropped belongings, nothing. It's as if the missing simply blinked out of existence. In many cases, even search dogs trained to follow a human scent trail for miles seem confused. Some refuse to track at all. Others begin to track, only to suddenly stop and circle aimlessly, as if the scent had ended in the middle of nowhere. Patterns have emerged over decades of studying these disappearances. Certain areas seem to be hotspots, clusters, where people vanish again and again. Over the years, sometimes under eerily similar conditions. Rocky boulder fields, dense forests, remote ridges, these are common features. Bodies of water are often nearby. Lakes, rivers, marshes. Bad weather tends to roll in shortly after a disappearance. hampering search efforts and erasing potential evidence. Even more perplexing, some missing persons are later found, but not in places that make any logical sense. Small children are discovered miles away, over rough terrain that should have been impossible for them to cross alone. In some cases, they are found alive, confused, unable to recall where they had been. In others, their bodies are recovered in areas that had already been thoroughly searched multiple times. Shoes are often missing, even in harsh environments where no one would willingly walk barefoot. Yet strangely, when bodies are recovered, their feet sometimes show no signs of injury, no cuts, no bruises, no frostbite. Some victims are found in pristine condition, lying peacefully, as if they simply lay down and went to sleep. Others are found under impossible conditions, like on top of high cliffs, or wedged inside tight spaces no adult could fit through. These details don't add up to any natural explanation. Predators don't leave bodies untouched. Accidental falls leave signs of trauma. Lost hikers typically leave some trail. Broken branches, dropped supplies, desperate attempts to survive. Yet time and time again, those signs are missing. Authorities often attribute these cases to common dangers, animal attacks, getting lost, exposure to the elements. And in many instances, those explanations are perfectly reasonable, but not all. Not by a long shot. Some cases are simply too strange, too improbable, to be explained away so easily. When a child disappears within sight of their parents and is later found on the other side of a fast-moving river, when an experienced outdoorsman vanishes without leaving so much as a torn piece of clothing behind, when multiple people vanish in the exact same area, under nearly identical conditions, decades apart, the rational mind struggles for answers. But the wilderness keeps its secrets. Researchers, retired law enforcement officers, and investigative writers have spent years compiling these cases, trying to find patterns, trying to uncover the hidden logic behind the chaos. They've catalogued hundreds of incidents, meticulously noting the similarities that officials are often reluctant to acknowledge. Out of this painstaking research, the term Missing 411 was born. It's not an official government term. It's a grassroots label, a way to name the unnamed, to draw attention to what so many would prefer to ignore. Missing 411 isn't about a single theory. It's about the questions no one can answer, the disappearances no one can explain, the cold, hard reality that in the heart of America's most beautiful wild places, people can vanish without a trace, and no one knows why. Some say it's simple misadventure, others whisper darker possibilities. Unknown predators, hidden dangers, forces beyond our understanding. Whatever the truth is, one fact remains clear. The wilderness is not just a place of beauty. It is a place of mystery, a place where the thin line between the known and the unknown is crossed, and crossed often. And when it happens, when someone steps over that invisible threshold, they become another unanswered question, another unsolved case, another name lost to the legend of Missing 411. Case 1. The Strange Vanishing of Dennis Martin. June 1969. Father's Day weekend. The Martin family, William, his son Dennis, his older brother Douglas, and William's father, Clyde, decided to spend the holiday in one of the most beautiful places in America, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. They set up camp at a spot known as Spence Field, a grassy clearing surrounded by dense woods and winding trails. The area was popular with hikers and families, a place considered safe and serene. Dennis was just 6 years old, a small boy, shy but full of energy. He wore a bright red t-shirt, blue shorts, and new Oxford shoes, a detail that would become hauntingly significant later. At the campsite, the Martins met another family with children close in age to Dennis and Douglas. The kids quickly bonded, running and laughing, playing an impromptu game of hide-and-seek among the low shrubs and trees surrounding the clearing. William Martin watched his son closely. He saw Dennis step behind a small bush, a playful grin on his face. It was only meant to be a few seconds, just long enough to surprise the others. But when William called out moments later, Dennis didn't answer. He walked over to the bush. No Dennis. No sounds of laughter. No rustling leaves. Nothing. At first, they thought he might be playing a prank, hiding a little too well. Minutes passed. The search grew wider, calling, shouting his name. No response. Panic began to seep into the edges of William's voice. Within an hour, the search had turned desperate. The family split up, scouring the woods, the trails, every possible hiding spot. When night fell, they knew it was beyond their ability. They needed help. Park rangers were alerted immediately. By the next morning, a full-scale search operation had begun. At its peak, more than 1,400 people joined the effort. Rangers, FBI agents, Special Forces troops from Fort Bragg, volunteers from surrounding towns. They brought dogs trained to track human scent. Helicopters flew overhead, scanning the forests and fields. They combed through every hollow, ravine, and thicket in a grid pattern, methodically covering the land around Spencefield. And yet, nothing. No footprints were found strange. Given Dennis's small size and the soft earth beneath the trees, not a scrap of fabric from his bright red shirt, not a shoe, not even broken branches to suggest he had stumbled into the brush. The forest had swallowed him whole. One clue, one that would haunt searchers for years, came from another family who had been hiking nearby that same afternoon. They were about a mile downhill from Spencefield when they reported hearing a strange, loud scream coming from the woods. A chilling, guttural sound that was unlike anything they had ever heard before. A few moments later, the father in that group spotted something he described as a rough-looking man, someone disheveled, dirty, moving quickly through the trees. The man appeared to be carrying something over his shoulder. They found it odd, but, at the time, did not connect it to the missing child. Later, when they heard about Dennis Martin, the memory of that scream and that shadowy figure took on a far darker significance. Despite the massive search, days turned into weeks. Rain battered the Smoky Mountains during the first few nights after Dennis's disappearance, washing away possible clues. Fog rolled thickly across the landscape, making visibility near impossible. Some believed Dennis might have fallen into a hidden sinkhole or a bear den. Others speculated about animal attacks, perhaps a bobcat or a bear had taken him. But rangers found no signs of struggle. No blood, no drag marks, no torn clothing. And a 6-year-old child doesn't simply outrun an army of searchers in every direction. Months passed. No trace. Dennis Martin had disappeared as if he had never been there at all. Years later, decades even, the case still remains one of the most baffling and heartbreaking mysteries in the history of the National Park Service. Some of the rescuers, in private, began to wonder if something more sinister had occurred. Theories circulated quietly. Could Dennis have been abducted, snatched by someone lurking in the woods, invisible among the trees? Could he have stumbled into a cave or underground crevice no one ever found? Or was it something beyond human understanding? The location itself adds weight to the mystery. The Great Smoky Mountains are ancient, older than the dinosaurs, carved by time into a labyrinth of ridges and valleys, dense with mist and shadow. Countless caves, sinkholes, and hidden dangers lie beneath the forest floor, places even seasoned rangers rarely tread. But still, no evidence, no bones, no fabric snagged on a branch, no Oxford shoes abandoned in the mud. It defies common sense. In the decades since Dennis Martin vanished, searchers have occasionally returned to Spencefield, hoping that erosion or time might finally reveal some clue. They have found nothing. The forest remains silent. The mystery remains whole. Dennis Martin became more than a missing person. He became a symbol of how little we truly control when we step into the wild. A reminder that even in familiar places, where families laugh and children play, the unknown waits silent, patient, and merciless. When you walk the trails of the Great Smoky Mountains today, it's easy to lose yourself in their beauty. The whisper of leaves in the wind, the scent of pine and damp earth, the soft trickle of distant streams. But if you pause too long, if you listen carefully enough, you might feel it. A quiet unease, a memory stitched into the land itself. The story of a little boy who stepped behind a bush and was never seen again. A chilling scream, a red shirt, an empty clearing, and nothing more. Case 2. The inexplicable disappearance of Paula Weldon. December 1946. In the quiet town of Bennington, Vermont, winter had just begun to set in. The air was cold and crisp. Snow dusted the peaks of the Green Mountains. It was a sleepy time of year when the days grew shorter and the forests turned silent. Paula Weldon was 18 years old, a bright, independent student at Bennington College. She was known for her lively spirit, her golden blonde hair, and her deep love of nature. On the afternoon of December 1st, she decided to take advantage of a brief break in the weather to go hiking. Paula told her roommate she was going for a walk, but didn't say exactly where. She dressed lightly for the weather, a red parka, jeans, sneakers, clothing, more suited for a brisk afternoon stroll than a winter trek in the mountains. She carried no money, no backpack, no supplies, just herself. Witnesses later reported seeing Paula along a popular trail known as the Long Trail, America's oldest long-distance hiking path, which cuts through the heart of Vermont's dense wilderness. Locals remembered her asking for directions. They remembered her walking confidently, alone, up the trail. At one point, a man and his family, out for a casual hike, noticed Paula ahead of them. They described how she was moving at a steady pace, about 50 yards ahead. They kept her in sight for a while. Then the trail bent sharply to the right, and when the family rounded the corner, Paula was gone, vanished, without a sound, without a trace. At first, no one realized something was wrong. Paula was an adult. College students often went off campus without notice. It wasn't until she failed to show up for classes the next day and missed an important dinner shift at the school's cafeteria that alarm bells rang. A search was quickly organized. Bennington College staff, local police, townspeople, and even students fanned out across the trail and the surrounding woods. Bloodhounds were brought in, trained to track even faint human scents through the thickest wilderness. At first, the dogs seemed to pick up Paula's trail, following it along the long trail, exactly where witnesses had seen her walking. But when they reached a sharp turn, they stopped. The scent ended abruptly. There was no sign of a struggle, no footprints leading off the trail into the deeper woods, no broken branches, no discarded clothing, nothing. It was as if Paula had simply stepped off the face of the earth at that bend in the path. The search expanded rapidly. The FBI was called in. Airplanes buzzed over the Green Mountains, scanning for signs of red against the snowy landscape. Ground teams combed through ravines, caves, abandoned cabins, any place where someone might have sought shelter or fallen. And yet, no body was ever found. No scraps of clothing, no jewelry, nothing belonging to Paula ever surfaced. Her disappearance became national news. Posters bearing her photograph, a smiling young woman full of life, were plastered across New England. Psychics were consulted. Reward money was offered. Leads were followed into nearby towns and even across state lines. Some believed she had run away to start a new life. Others whispered darker theories of foul play, of predators lurking in the woods. But none of the rumors ever led to answers. No credible sightings, no confessions, no evidence. The mystery deepened when investigators uncovered a curious pattern. Paula was not the first person to vanish. In the Bennington area, under unusual circumstances, between 1945 and 1950, a string of strange disappearances would occur along roughly the same stretch of wilderness, a region that locals would later nickname the Bennington Triangle. Men, women, even a child all vanished, seemingly into thin air, often without leaving a single clue behind. In Paula's case, her light clothing made survival in the cold nearly impossible. If she had gotten lost, hypothermia would have set in quickly, and yet no remains were ever found, even after extensive searches in the spring thaw, when the snow melted and the forest floor was laid bare. Some have speculated that Paula may have fallen into an unmarked mineshaft, relics from Vermont's 19th century mining operations. The woods are riddled with them deep. Narrow pits now hidden by decades of undergrowth and shifting earth. A single misstep could mean vanishing forever into darkness. Others have suggested human involvement. Perhaps she had been followed. Perhaps someone had waited at that bend in the trail, knowing it was a blind spot, where a person could be snatched without witnesses. But if that were the case, there were no signs of a struggle. No calls for help, no disturbed ground, just silence. Paula's disappearance shook the town of Bennington to its core. For the first time, a sense of unease crept into the surrounding wilderness, a feeling that something unseen, something beyond understanding, might be lurking in the deep woods. Decades later, hikers still walk the long trail. The forest is as beautiful as ever, towering pines, winding streams, mossy stones. But for those who know the story of Paula Weldon, a simple hike can feel different. The turn in the trail seems sharper, the silence feels heavier, and the question remains: how does a vibrant young woman, seen by multiple witnesses, simply vanish in the span of a few steps? The forest keeps its secrets well. Paula Weldon is still missing, and perhaps somewhere deep within the Green Mountains, the answer lies waiting, hidden, just beyond the next bend. strange duplications, as the missing cases piled up across national parks and remote wilderness areas. Investigators began noticing something unsettling. The disappearances were not random. They followed chilling, repeating patterns too precise, too consistent to ignore. First, the terrain. Many victims disappeared in or around boulder fields, rocky outcrops, or dense patches of ancient forest. These places, rugged and unforgiving, seemed to possess an almost magnetic pull in these cases. It wasn't just ordinary trails or open fields. Where people vanished, it was always near locations that were difficult to search, difficult to traverse, places where the earth itself seemed designed to conceal. Second, the weather. In an alarming number of cases, severe weather would strike immediately after a disappearance. Torrential rains, sudden snowstorms, thick fog rolling in without warning. These natural forces erased tracks, washed away scents, and made aerial searches nearly impossible, as if nature itself was complicit, sweeping away all evidence. Just hours after the event. Third, the behavior of search dogs. Bloodhounds, trained to track human scent over miles of rugged terrain, often acted strangely in these cases. In many instances, the dogs would follow a trail for a short distance, and then stop. Not because they had lost interest, not because they were tired, but because the scent simply vanished, as if the person they were tracking had been plucked from the ground into the air. Some dogs would even refuse to track at all, sitting down, whining, refusing to move forward, as if something unseen was warning them away. Fourth, the demographic clusters. Most victims fell into two groups: young children, typically under 10 years old, and healthy, fit adults, often experienced outdoors people, hunters or hikers. It made no sense. Children who should have struggled to travel even short distances in rugged terrain would be found, when they were found, at all miles away, in areas nearly impossible for them to reach. And seasoned hikers, people who knew the land intimately, vanished without sending a single distress signal, without leaving a single trail behind. Fifth, the odd condition of recovered bodies. In those rare cases where remains were found, they often turned up in places that had already been thoroughly searched. A clearing, a trail junction, an open meadow, locations that dozens of rescuers had passed through multiple times. And yet, somehow, weeks or months later, the missing person or their clothing would appear there, as if they had been placed after the fact, and the bodies themselves often showed no clear cause of death. No signs of animal attack, no signs of hypothermia, just death, silent and unexplained. Sixth, missing clothing. Another detail that surfaced again and again. Clothing found neatly folded, or shoes removed from the body without clear reason. Shoes discarded miles from where the body was discovered. Sometimes, the victim's jacket or shirt would be found separately, neatly laid on a rock or beside a tree, as if someone or something had deliberately arranged them. Seventh, the silence. Many disappearances occurred when the victim was just steps away from companions, turned a corner on a trail, crossed a small ridge, paused for a few seconds behind a tree, and when companions followed, they were simply gone. No sounds of struggle, no cries for help, nothing but an eerie, heavy silence. Eighth, no memory. In the extremely rare instances when a missing person was recovered, alive, usually young children, They often had no memory of what had happened. Some described being taken care of by a woman in the woods or a big dog. Others said nothing at all, only that they went to sleep and woke up somewhere else. There were no consistent stories, just fragments of strange, dreamlike impressions, disconnected from reality. Ninth, cluster zones. Research has revealed that these disappearances are not evenly distributed across all parks. Instead, they cluster into specific hot zones, regions where multiple vanishings, often separated by decades, occur within the same tight geographic radius. One of the most infamous is the Yosemite cluster in California. Another lies in the Great Smoky Mountains. Others, the Rocky Mountains, the Pacific Northwest, and even parts of New England. Finally, the lack of official explanation. Despite the recurring patterns, despite the volume of missing persons, the National Park Service does not maintain a centralized database of disappearances. No master list, no coordinated investigations between parks. Each case is treated as an isolated incident: hiker, error, animal attack, accident. And yet, the patterns continue. Year after year, person after person, vanishing into America's wild places without explanation, without closure. The further you look into the missing 411 phenomenon, the clearer it becomes. Something unknown is happening in the wilderness. Something that follows rules, but not rules we understand. Something that seems to choose its victims carefully. Something that covers its tracks with a precision that defies logic. Some say it's simply the work of nature, dangerous terrain, predators, unpredictable weather. Others whisper darker theories, secret abductions, portals, creatures from old folklore, forces beyond human comprehension. But the patterns are real, and every year the wilderness claims more. More questions, more empty trails, more silence, and fewer answers. Hypotheses, scary explanations. When people vanish without a trace, when search teams find no clues, when patterns emerge but answers remain hidden, the human mind searches for explanations, some logical, others far more unsettling. At first glance, the simplest theory is accidents. The wilderness is vast, unforgiving, a slip on a rocky path, a hidden crevice, exposure to the elements, inexperienced hikers venturing too far, experienced hikers overestimating their limits. These things happen. Nature is indifferent to human life. Wild animals present another theory. Bears, mountain lions, wolves, predators that could attack swiftly, drag victims into dense underbrush, and leave little behind. But this explanation falters when you examine the evidence, or lack of it. Animal attacks leave signs, tracks, blood trails, shredded clothing. In missing 411 cases, these signs are almost always absent. Then there is the human element. Serial killers, opportunistic predators lurking in the woods, waiting for the perfect victim. This idea is terrifying but not impossible. However, many disappearances occur deep in isolated areas, far from roads, far from places where a killer could easily hunt without risk of detection. And it does not explain the patterns, the terrain, the sudden weather, the missing clothing, the vanishing scents. When logical theories fail, we are forced to look deeper, into possibilities that few dare to consider. Some researchers have proposed the existence of unknown predators, creatures that live hidden within the remote corners of the world, creatures adapted perfectly to the environment, capable of stalking and taking prey without leaving traces, survivors of ancient lineages, or perhaps beings from beyond our current understanding of nature. Whispers tell of massive birds, great cats unseen by modern science, or even entities without physical form, beings that hunt through other senses. Others suggest something even stranger, interdimensional portals. According to this theory, certain areas of wilderness, particularly those near boulder fields or geological anomalies, are thin places, locations where the fabric between realities is weaker, where a person could, with a single misstep, fall through into another world. This would explain the sudden vanishing, the scent trails that end abruptly, the lack of evidence, as if the victim simply ceased to exist in our plane of reality. The Bennington Triangle in Vermont, Mount Shasta in California, parts of the Rocky Mountains all have legends of portals, doorways, rips in the veil between worlds. Stories handed down by Native American tribes speak of spirit roads, forbidden places where humans were warned never to tread. Modern science scoffs at such ideas, but the disappearances continue. And then there are those who point to something older, something ancient. Ancient forces, hidden within the wilderness. Ancient forces. Stories exist in every culture about entities tied to the earth itself. Spirits of the forest, guardians, or in North America, native folklore speaks of creatures like the Wendigo, a malevolent spirit associated with winter, isolation, and madness. In other traditions, there are tales of shapeshifters, watchers, beings who could lure travelers away from the path and into oblivion. Perhaps these myths are echoes of a truth we have long forgotten. Perhaps there are intelligences in the wilderness older than humanity, indifferent to human suffering, operating by rules we cannot fathom. Perhaps the deep places of the world are not empty at all, but occupied. Some theorists believe these forces are triggered by certain conditions. A person alone, vulnerable, straying from the group, moving into sacred ground without knowing, and once targeted, there is no escape. Interestingly, many missing 411 victims were last seen at moments of separation. A hiker who walked just a few steps ahead, a child who lagged slightly behind, an instant of isolation and then gone. No struggle, no sound, only disappearance. Skeptics argue these ideas are fanciful, that there must be a rational explanation, even if we have not yet found it. But for the families of the missing, for the searchers who found nothing but silence, the rational explanations offer little comfort. In the end, all we are left with are theories, none proven, none fully explaining the chilling consistency of these cases. What is certain is that something is happening in America's wild places, something beyond simple accidents, something that follows dark, invisible rules, something that has claimed hundreds, perhaps thousands of lives. And if these disappearances are the work of ancient forces, forces we cannot see, cannot understand, then the wilderness is not just dangerous, it is alive and watching. To this day, there are over 1,600 documented cases of people vanishing in North America's national parks and wilderness areas. Cases that defy logic, science, and common sense. No footprints, no torn clothing, no signs of struggle, just gone. Searches lasting weeks, involving helicopters, bloodhounds, hundreds of trained volunteers, yet no clues are ever found, only memories, only loss. The official explanations often feel hollow. Lost hikers, animal attacks, exposure to the elements. But when the same eerie patterns repeat, when seasoned outdoorsmen vanish steps away from their campsites, when children are found miles away, uphill, with no memory of how they got there, it becomes harder, much harder to believe that these are mere accidents. There is something about the wild places of the earth, something beautiful, something untamed, and maybe something unknowable. The national parks we admire for their beauty are the same places where the ground seems to swallow people whole, where a mist can roll in suddenly, erasing all sense of direction, where unseen forces seem to pluck the unlucky from the very air. They say nature is indifferent, but perhaps, just perhaps, something in the deep woods watches us back. Maybe some trails are never meant to be walked alone. Maybe some ridges, some boulder fields, some shadowed valleys are better left undisturbed. The missing are not just statistics. They are fathers, mothers, children, friends, each one a story unfinished, each one a whisper carried on the wind, unanswered, and the wilderness never forgets. So next time you wander off the trail, next time you feel the call of the deeper woods, stop, listen, feel the silence pressing in around you, and ask yourself, will you be the next chapter in the missing for? The stories we tell tonight are real. The mysteries are unsolved. And somewhere, even now, another name may be written into the forgotten pages of the wilderness. If these stories gripped you, if you felt the chill of the unknown, I invite you to join us. Subscribe to Dark Truths for more true accounts of the unexplained. Stories where reality blurs into nightmare, where every shadow might hide a secret. Like this video, if you felt the weight of the wilderness tonight, share it with someone who dares to walk into the unknown, and comment below. Tell us, would you still hike the deep woods, knowing the missing 411 are still out there, waiting? Thank you for stepping into the darkness with us. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, the wilderness is always watching.